The Land Rover Defender is one of those iconic cars that almost everyone recognises. It's hardly changed, visually at least, in over half a century, though under the skin, this is actually far more of a high-tech vehicle than you might expect. Its status as one of the world's ultimate 4x4 go-anywhere workhorses remains, however, further enhanced by the introduction of a Euro 5 compatible 2.2 litre 122 brake horsepower diesel engine. Once upon a time, back in 1947, there was a man called Maurice Wilks. By day, he was the chief designer of the Rover car company. By night and weekend, he was an enthusiastic amateur farmer at his small holding in Anglesey, aided by an old war surplus Willys Jeep. When one day the Jeep spluttered to a halt, Maurice had a problem. Spare parts were impossible to get, as were replacement vehicles. Secretly, Wilks was rather pleased. He'd always rather fancied having an excuse to design something better. He did. And nearly 70 years and 2 million vehicles later, as you can see, it's still going strong. First known simply as the Land Rover, this vehicle was first launched at the 1948 Amsterdam Motor Show as something much more than a motor vehicle. True, it could be used as a car, but it was also designed for use as anything from a power source to a small tractor, the ultimate Swiss Army knife of farming equipment. Over the years, ownership of the Land Rover brand came and went, but this iconic vehicle remained much the same, gaining coil springs and a slightly longer wheelbase in 1984, then the Defender name in 1989 to differentiate it from some of the brand's other products. The new millennium saw this car with a rattly old TD5 diesel engine, eventually replaced in 2007 by a 2.4 litre diesel borrowed from Ford's Transit, and good enough to power the vehicle for 5 more years until final changes were needed to meet Euro 5 legislation. Which brings us up to date and to the version that we're here to look at, a last historic throw of the dice by the Solihull brand. This car can climb many obstacles, but the biggest of all, the legislator's pen, will ultimately defeat this first-generation version sometime in the relatively near future. Ever-toughening safety and emission standards already mean that it can't be sold in the States, and the Mark II model that will inevitably follow and open up that market, as well as future European ones, will, to be able to do so, have to feature changes so extreme as to render it an unrecognisable cousin to the car that began life on Maurice Wilks's farm. Before all that happens, though, we can all still enjoy a proper one. This, the original, even if we don't have our own farm or live halfway up Ben Nevis. Thanks for this is due to that culminating package of improvements I just mentioned, introduced for the 2012 model year, and there to satisfy the Euro 5 bureaucrats through the installation of a cleaner, more up-to-date 2.2 litre Ford Duratorque diesel, fitted for the first time with a diesel particulate filter. Other updates, ventilated disc brakes, the option of more comfortable seats and upgraded stereo equipment were more minor, but then the 2007 upgrade had already introduced a redesigned gearbox, extra sound insulation and a smarter, more car-like interior. In fact, in more recent years, pretty much everything has been changed to differentiate modern-era Defenders from the Land Rover original, but ultimately, nothing is really very different. Thank goodness for that. At last, a driving experience that really is that, a driving experience. It won't suit everyone, of course. If it did, Land Rover would have no need to offer Freelanders, Discoveries or Range Rovers. An acquired taste then, and the Defender's loyal following would have it no other way. You sit high up, of course, and bang your elbows on the doors until you get used to twirling the huge wheel. The Getrag 6-speed gearbox is a bit notchy, the suspension is very firm, crashing you over the slightest bump, and there's an enormous turning circle which will make you think twice about tight multi-storey car parks. All of which will irritate if, rather unreasonably, you expect this vehicle to be some sort of stripped-out Discovery. Approach it looking for something a little different, and the faults become endearing foibles. You almost wish for a storm to blow up on the way to the Chinese takeaway, or a road closed sign to tell of flash flooding on the school run. But here, of course, your Defender will come into its own. For the other 350 days of the year, when there's no excuse to properly exercise the permanent four-wheel drive system by engaging the low-range gearbox and locking the centre differential, it'll keep up with the traffic on road and get you where you want to go as you cheerfully wave, passing other Defender owners, members of the almost secret society that appears to be entitled by ownership. What more do you want from a vehicle that will tackle a 45-degree slope going forwards or backwards? A car that will wade through water half a metre deep without modification and traverse a 35-degree hill. Use the low-range transmission you'll need in really rough terrain, and you'll find that its first gear is ultra short, leaving you in a sort of crawler mode where the car moves slower than an ambling pedestrian. With this engaged, thanks to the clever anti-stall system, you can just take your feet off the pedals and do a little more than keep the steering pointing in the right direction as your Defender clambers easily over obstacles you couldn't even walk across. There aren't many 4x4s you could call rivals, and those that potentially are, say Jeep's Wrangler, lag way behind in the extreme rough stuff. Take the Defender's astounding 47-degree approach and departure angles. The Jeep offers just 38 and 32 degrees respectively, and it calls itself unstoppable. To maximise this Land Rover's mud-plugging prowess, I'd want to specify mine with the brand's optional off-road pack, which gives you an under-ride protection bar, all-terrain ABS braking with electronic traction control, a heavy-duty steel spare wheel, and the tow bar that almost all owners will want. There's no option for the kind of terrain response system more car-like Land Rover models have, which automatically sets the vehicle up to suit the conditions you're driving through. But then I get the impression that a typical Defender driver would be rather patronised by that. And that 2.2-litre diesel engine, installed as a supposedly cleaner replacement for the old Transit-derived 2.4-litre unit, well, the improvements here are pretty much all in terms of the environmental hoops Land Rover has had to jump through to provide a Euro 5 compatible power plant. The power and torque on offer are exactly the same as before, 122 brake horsepower and 360 Newton meters, so there's no loss or gain in performance. What's important though is that, like its predecessor, this more modern unit lends itself well to off-road adventures with a healthy dose of pulling power that gets you smartly off the line, is crucially accessible low down in the rev range, and ticks over happily whether climbing steep slippery hills or fulfilling the Defender's enormous 3,500 kilogram towing capability. Motorway cruising is improved thanks to an acoustic engine cover, but still noisy. Rest to 60 takes 14.7 seconds, and the maximum speed is limited, perhaps wisely, to a modest 90 miles an hour. Is there a more iconic shape in British motoring than this one? I doubt it. This is a national treasure, a statement of Britishness that you'll find used by aid agencies, mountain rescuers and explorers the world over. Visually, little has changed over the years apart from the raised bonnet necessary to accommodate the larger, more recent diesel engines. Now, this part of the car, rather sadly, is no longer fabricated from long-life aluminium, but most of the other simple, flat, easy-to-repair panels you'll find around the bodywork are. These still bolted, as ever, to a tough steel box section ladder frame chassis. You can even see the rivets. There are some anomalies though. Climb inside and you'll find that though there are modern optional touches, like an iPod socket and a full house 10-speaker Alpine stereo, basics like electric mirrors and any sort of airbag are noticeable by their absence. Traction control and ABS are only optional on plusher models, and you still can't have height adjustment for either the steering wheel or the seat. Engineering priorities, I suppose. Still, how many other cars can offer a rear external power takeoff, allowing you to take the vehicle anywhere and use it as a mobile generator? At the wheel, in what Land Rover calls its command driving position, where you gaze out through the traditional flat screen and now sit on plusher, more supportive seats, it remains refreshingly utilitarian. Having said that, despite the rows of blanked off switches, it's now much smarter than the cabin you'll find in more elderly Defender models, thanks to instruments borrowed from the Discovery and a one-piece dashboard that has fresh air eyeball vents. It's a fascia unit that eliminates a lot of the creaks and rattles that you used to get. I certainly want this useful but sadly optional 14-litre centre storage box. Some of the old throwbacks remain though. The upright handbrake, the key that can't be turned when the headlamp switch is in the on position, the aftermarket stereo with its old push-up 80s aerial, the restricted rearward front seat travel, the weak headlights, the wipers that just clear a part of the screen, and maybe most initially annoying of all, such ridiculous cabin narrowness that you're constantly bashing your elbows on the windows during low-speed manoeuvring. The original designers, you see, prioritised other things. At night in the Gobi Desert, you're going to be more interested in the fact that this vehicle has a volcanic heater than the reality that the column stalks date back to the original Austin Metro. And during the day there, you'll care that the air conditioning offered on plusher versions cools the cabin twice as quickly as it did on more elderly models. It all reminds me that in older, tougher days, air conditioning on this car used to be supplied by a flap at the front, freezing your hands on the steering wheel in winter. And though that was improved after the turn of the century, it wasn't by much. Before 2007, this car didn't even have side window demist vents. For passenger-focused owners, there are two main station wagon body shapes. The three-door, short wheelbase Defender 90 has just 4 seats that, rather uniquely, you can only access through the rear door. No MPV-style slidey foldy chairs here. Still, at least rear occupants do sit facing forward rather than perched on the side of the vehicle as they used to be. If you want a bit more passenger versatility, you'll be more interested in the 5-door long wheelbase Defender 110 variant, which, thanks to its extra length, can accommodate up to 7 folk, with the third seating row, again these days conventionally forward facing and sited ahead of a vast boot, which is even carpeted. A bit odd that, given that you're supposed to be able to hose the cabin out. Here I've got that model's long wheelbase chassis, but in this case mated to a double cab pickup body. Still, the rear part of the cabin is pretty much as it would be in a 110 station wagon. Which means that legroom is in fairly short supply. But with the boxy, airy, high-set interior, you don't really notice it too much. Headroom is at a bit of a premium too, thanks to the way that this second row has been perched up so much higher than the seats in the front. It makes this car a great vehicle to ride in. You can just imagine yourself on jungle safari. Defenders aren't cheap, so it's just as well that they hold their value as tenaciously as they'll hold the road on a slippery track. List prices suggest that you'll be paying somewhere from just under £25,000 to just over £30,000 for a 3-door 90 station wagon. And the price for more passenger space? Well, depending on the spec you choose, that's standard, county or XS, there's a premium of between £2,000 to £3,000 to graduate up to the 7-seater long wheelbase 5-door 110 station wagon. That car thereby pitched into the £27,000 to £33,000 bracket. Commercial users, of course, as you might expect, have a much wider Defender model choice than that. Businesses not needing the rear seats in a short wheelbase Defender 90, for example, can order it in hardtop van or pickup guises and save around £1,100 on the passenger version price. There's also a chassis cab model. And, of course, commercial users who choose the long wheelbase chassis as a starting point have an even more versatile range of choices, especially since for them this platform comes not only in 110 form, but also in lengthened 130 guise. There's a high-capacity pickup, again a chassis cab version, and various double cab models that offer second row seating with usable carriage capacity behind. Of these, there's a so-called utility wagon. That's basically a double cab van. And here I've got what Land Rover calls a double cab HCPU, the letters standing for high capacity pickup. Actually, the various commercial derivations of this vehicle are almost endless. Land Rover's professional conversions program sees to that, transforming Defenders into everything from airport fire tenders to ambulances and mobile hydraulic platforms. But here we're evaluating this vehicle as a car, so let's get back to that. Does it have a realistic rival in the modern day marketplace? Well, not really. With the demise of the basic Toyota Land Cruiser and Nissan Patrol models that used to be sold in the UK, realistic go-anywhere, do-anything competitors are almost non-existent, unless you count the Jeep Wrangler, short and long wheelbase versions of which will respectively cost you around £4,000 more model for model. The Jeep's a bit more car-like, though not much, but it isn't as tough or capable, the two qualities that I'm guessing will be prioritised by most potential Defender buyers. If, having considered all of this, you conclude that nothing but a Defender will do, then whichever station wagon passenger version you choose, 4-seat 90 or 7-seat 110, don't go expecting too much in terms of equipment frippery in baseline models. You do get tinted glass, a rear wash wipe, a rear folding step and rear mud flaps, but otherwise most modern creature comforts are either on the options list or fitted to up-spec county or excess variants. It's to these you'll have to turn if you want your Defender fitted with things like front electric windows, a CD player with MP3 compatibility, a heated rear window, central locking or even manually adjustable window mirrors. This top-spec XS variant gets all of that, of course, and also includes niceties like alloy wheels, a parametric and volumetric alarm, air conditioning, cup holders, and a useful front centre console storage compartment. It's when it comes to safety, though, that this vehicle betrays its age. Even on this top model, there are no airbags, you can't have stability control, and you have to pay extra for a package that gives you ABS braking and electronic traction control. Options include part leather seats, an upgraded 10-speaker Alpine stereo system, a contrasting colour roof section, and of course a tow bar. No Defender should be without that. Rather than ticking individual options though, it might be better to consider one of the packs that Land Rover now offers, badged cold climate, convenience, off-road, roof appointment, exterior and style. Although you'll need to do without many of the luxury features that most buyers spending this sort of money will come to expect, the Defender nevertheless represents decent value for money and isn't expensive to keep on the road. Parts are cheap, most servicing can be carried out with a lump hammer, things rarely break in the first place, and this reflects in very good residual values. Rather surprisingly, given its Euro 5 billing, the 2.2 litre diesel engine is only fractionally cleaner and more economical than the old 2.4 litre unit. The addition of a diesel particulate filter for the first time doesn't help it here. But despite this, the engineers insist that this vehicle's environmental credentials have been tidied up. Now, most of their head scratching has resulted in a bespoke anti-pollution system that sees the exhaust catalyst and the particulate filter mounted close together and carefully positioned in the engine bay to prevent damage during serious off-roading. On to the running cost figures, which, as I've already suggested, are little changed from those the Defender has produced since 2007. A short wheelbase 90 model manages 266 grams per kilometre of CO2 and 28.3 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle. For a long wheelbase 110 variant, the respective returns are 295 grams per kilometre and 25.5 miles to the gallon. Insurance groupings range between 25 and 28. Despite the Defender's recent refurb, it remains as solid and uncompromising as it's always been, with off-road ability to Warrior Challenger tank. Approach it as an alternative to modern family 4x4s and you miss the point. Buy a Discovery for that. Here instead is the hardest wearing, most capable and most cost-effective proper off-roader that sensible money can buy. Equipped with its Euro 5 compatible 2.2 litre diesel engine, this is the go-to choice if you're looking for something that will keep going when other 4x4s have ground to a sorry halt. It's still the toughest thing out there.